Today, we're going to look here in our second to last message in the series, The New Rules. And every Sunday, I've been talking about a rule of how to live as a Christian. And this is one of them, but certainly a very important one that requires a lot of attention and a lot of sacrifice on our part, a lot of determination. And that is in the area of humility. The book of Philippians is written for many purposes. There's several really great theological purposes. But one of the motivating factors when Paul wrote the book of Philippians was that there were two people in the church who had gotten into an argument and they were quarreling and causing disagreement. Now, that's bad enough, but what happens is that the rest of the congregation picks sides. And so half the congregation was siding with one person, half the congregation sided with the other person, and that's not even a church anymore, right? That's just a horrible situation. All of us are aware of what quarreling can do, what infighting can do, and how it just absolutely destroys everything. And so this passage here, it talks about Jesus in a magnificent and a powerful way, but it's setting Jesus up as an example. Live like this so that there is not quarreling among you, so that there is not infighting among you. Quarreling creates disunity in every situation. But the secret of unity is humility. The secret of unity is always humility. It's hard to get away from that because it is just overwhelmingly, pervasively true in every way. Pride is the opposite of humility, isn't it? Pride is the opposite. And pride has a way of making everything worse. Pride destroys relationships. Pride divides people. Pride is the thing that the natural mindset of the human being that sets people against each other. Whenever you have trouble with somebody, a lot of times it's not the facts that you're battling against, is it? A lot of times it's the pride in the individual. That's what prevents progress from happening. Every once in a while, as little as possible, I'll have to deal with the city on a permit issue or a regulation issue. If all I had to deal with was the letter of the law, it would make life so much easier. But every employee of our city also has a level of pride that comes along with everything else. And you have to pay attention to those issues because those are factors, aren't they? And of course, they have to come to me, and they also have that issue. So I'm not saying it's one-sided at all, but I am saying inevitably pride is always an issue that is sitting there. Pride is what breaks down marriages. It's what breaks down partnerships. It's what breaks down any kind of union whatsoever. It's the pride that destroys those things. And what Paul is talking about here, he's talking about how important it is for us to seek humility, to get out there and seek humility, because humility settles arguments. Humility has a way. It's the antidote, if you will, to quarreling and to arguments, is humility. If just one party, if just one side would take the side and see the importance of humility, a lot of arguments would disappear, would slide out of the way. Humility is the way, and that is the way of Christians. When we encounter somebody who has a very hot temper and the vitriol is escalated, what is the way? How can the Christian help in that situation? How can the Christian get beyond that, get to the other side of that, and end up in a much better place? Many times a hot temper is what prevents anything from happening. But in the same way, Christ shows us in this account that we're going to read how humility moves us beyond that. But it's not just a hot temper. It would also be just flat out pride, or it would also be defensiveness, when somebody is very defensive and these great barriers shoot up and it's almost impenetrable. The way of Jesus shows us this is how a Christian overcomes the defensiveness. When somebody begins to claim their rights for something or a situation, that's very hard to overcome when people are just, well, you're not going to do this because I have the right, I have the right, I have the right. Whether they do or they don't, it becomes a barrier, but the way of Christ is a way through that barrier of people holding up their rights. It's not easy for us Christians as we go through these things, but Christians at the very core, we are to have the mind of Christ. And what that means is that as Christ was somebody who gave himself to us, Christ was somebody who served us. Christ is somebody who obeyed the Father on our behalf. He sets the example. Sometimes Christianity can be misinterpreted to not being a religion or a system of belief that we are sacrificial, that we are given, but instead it doesn't become about our giving, it becomes about our getting, right? That kind of becomes, well, I'm a Christian because that's a good way to get. I'm a Christian because it's a good way for others to see how important I am and that they would start to serve me in my interests. And that even God would look at me and begin to obey what I'm telling him to do. And it's not anymore about us obeying God, it becomes God obeying us. That is not Christian anymore. That's a long ways away from that. A lot of people love that presentation of Christianity, even though it's not true. They love that because in our very heart, in our very core, is this desire for us to get more, for us to be served, for us to be obeyed. That's just right. That's just right where the heart of this thing is. I came across an interesting story. Well, let's see, that I talked about the pride that divides us. I'm going to talk now about the humility that saves us. Came across an interesting story. A Dutch theologian or a pastor, his name was Soren Kierkegaard, and he came up with this interesting story. And the way the story starts is that this very humble peasant, and he didn't dress in any flashy way, and he didn't come from any kind of noble family, and he was very poor. But what he did was he fell in love with a little girl I should be careful, I say little, don't I? He fell in love with a girl who was of marriage age, over 18. What has society done to me? Oh my gosh, I am ruined. He fell in love with this girl appropriately. and his thing was, well, how can I get her to love me in return? And so he would talk to her. He would express his love for her. He made her laugh. And what she saw in him was that this was a very good man. This was a godly man. This was a caring man. And even though this guy didn't have any of the things that her mother wanted her to find in a man, yet she knew that this guy loved her. And as a result, she loved him. And even if that meant that she wasn't going to live a very luxurious or easy life, it meant that she was going to be able to marry somebody that she loved, and knowing that her new husband would love her. That's the first part of the story. The backside of the story is this. There was a very powerful kingdom. And in this powerful kingdom, there was a young prince whose father died, and he inherited the entire kingdom. And instantly, this young man became very wealthy and very powerful. And he could have anything he wanted in that kingdom. And one day, he was looking out over his kingdom, and he saw this little girl. Oh, Lord. He saw this girl, and he instantly in his head said, I would like to marry her. And he went and he talked to his advisors about it, and they says, no, you should not marry her because there's a problem in your relationship already. You are the king. You are powerful. You are infinitely wealthy. You can do anything you want. How would you ever know if a peasant girl would love you? Because she would never in her entire life be able to thank you for all that you have given her. And you will never know what she will do to our kingdom or what self-interest that she has, because it's just so unequal. And what the king did, he thought about that and he said, I can't do anything to bring her up to my level so that I would know that she loved me. I would never, everything would be like make-believe, and I'd always wonder, I wonder if. So what I need to do is I need to divest myself of all of my good clothes. I need to divest myself of all of my possessions. I need to get rid of all of my power. And I need to disguise myself and come into this village, and over a period of time, let people get to know me for who I am on the inside, away from everything that I have been given. And that's what he did. He went into this little village and he made himself known. He got a job. He learned their language. He learned their ways. He learned their customs. And then for that girl, he began to court her. He began to do everything he could to get her attention. And sure enough, that was the guy, the king, that the girl fell in love with. And soon enough, they had agreed to get married. And that's where we get to the first part of the story. But the principle of this story that applies to us in a very big way is the story of Jesus coming to earth. Because genuine love between unequal parties always requires great humility on the one who is greater. And it requires the lesser one to accept one stepping down to their level. And that's the situation that Jesus came into us. If Jesus had come as God, if he had come to this earth in all of his might and all of his power and all of his wealth and everything, if Jesus had come like that and encountered us and asked us to begin a relationship with him, all of us would be sitting there saying, oh yeah, that sounds good. What can I get out of this? But Jesus knew that that would be a barrier to a real relationship. So what he did was he came as a lowly man. He came as somebody without all of the things that come with who God is. And he came like a humble one of us, the most humble one of us, if you will. And it's in that relationship that we can see that what Jesus Christ did, love caused him to lose all of the fixings, all of the accessories, all of the reputations. Love caused him to do that because he came down to our level to have a relationship with us. That's what this passage that we're going to read leads us through. As we read this, you'll kind of see, it's not very long. I don't want to make it sound like it's going to be very long, but it's not, but it's kind of in the shape of a V. And so Jesus starts out very high, and he quickly goes all the way down to the bottom of humility. But now that he hits the bottom, he bounces back up, and God restores to him all of his glory. So he goes, zoop, zoop, just like that. Just like you're hoping your stock will do. Zoop, zoop, right? That's the hope. And that's how this story is about Jesus. He comes down, all the way down to us and even below us, and then he comes back up. I know a lot of you have been to the Louvre in Paris, and there is the Mona Lisa, Leonardo da Vinci's portrait of the lady. And it's kind of a strange thing. I've never known anybody, and myself included, who's gone to see the Mona Lisa and like, oh, look at this. Oh, it's so beautiful. Usually the thing is there are so many thousands of people looking over this tiny little picture, and then you just do whatever you can to take a picture of it. But what people tell us, the reason it's so famous is because it's supposed to be the perfect portrait of somebody. That seeing this portrait tells you everything there is to know about the figure, about the lady who sat for this picture. While that is very true, perhaps, of the Mona Lisa, there's also a portrait that is painted of Jesus Christ in this passage that tells you everything. And maybe it's not a portrait in image, but it's a portrait of words that in this short passage tells you everything that God wants you to know about who Jesus is. And the hard thing as we read through this is how it relates to us. And he starts this passage very interestingly, and he starts it referring to the problem, but this is what he says: in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. So let's read this passage together and see what Jesus is calling us to in our own mindset. I'll read the first verse again, and then you guys come in verse 6, and we'll read through verse 11. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name. And every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Now I'm going to share the mindset that changes us. One of the more difficult tasks of a Christian, and this is a lifelong task, is to, in our own heads, come to terms how God serves us. There's just something in us that rejects that. Just, no. How can a human be served by God? But when you read Scripture from beginning to end, Alpha, the Omega, Genesis to Revelation, you continually, over and over, find that the nature of God is to serve humanity, is to serve people. That all the way through, God comes in great humility and suffers greatly, suffers as we do, in an effort to relate to us, in an effort to understand us, and in an effort to lead us to a better day. He comes to our situation to do this. All of creation, in my view, is created in service of mankind. I'm always fascinated by the role of water on our planet, how there is not a drop more of water or not a drop less of water on this planet, that the water you drank this morning is probably the water that a dinosaur drank so many years ago. That there's just so much, and here it stays, and it just circulates and brings, and no human mind, no engineer would ever be able to think of a system that for however many years you want to say it was, that water continues to bring life to humanity. I came across another statistic, or another fact that I thought was fascinating, at least to me, was what is the most rare material in the universe? Well, my first thought was it's probably gold. Gold is very rare. Oh, no. No, there's lots of gold in this universe. Well, it's probably something like platinum. Platinum is titanium. No. These are all metals that while they might be rare on Earth, when you consider the number of galaxies and above that planets, there's plenty of those, plenty of that. What is the most rare material in the world, in the universe? Wood. And I got to thinking, wood? Yeah, wood, planet Earth. There is no known wood and anywhere in the universe. And then I was thinking about how wood has a way of multiplying itself all by itself. Has a way of saying, well, here I'm one tree, but I'm going to make 2 or 3 more trees just this year. And it has a way completely outside of the role of a human being. And look how much we use wood. Look at all the different ways that wood has benefited mankind. And in the same way, we see that all of nature serves to the purpose of who we are as people. And everything that you see in God aligns with that. It is God continually serving. To me, it would be strange, I would love this, to see a song that talked about God's holiness and God's humility. Wouldn't that be a strange juxtaposition to put holiness and humility together? I would say, well, no. We either sing about his holiness, which is totally otherworldly and powerful and all-encompassing, but then to sing about his humility. But no, the two words go together. Humility is a part of God's holiness. God's holiness is expressed in his humility. And the two go together very importantly. And it's hard for us as people, it's hard for us as Christians to get the concept of just how important servanthood is to the Christian life, how important it is to Jesus Christ, how important it is in God's priorities for us that we be people who are humble, that we be people who are servant. It's being the very nature of Jesus Christ, having the mindset. That's the mindset of Jesus. And we don't like that. Oh, we don't want that. We're like, even now, we're trying to think, well, I could be humble in this situation, but not in that situation, right? Oh, no. God calls us that would be our mindset, period, across the board. That we would be people who serve others, that we be people who have the mindset of love that Christ has, the mindset that reaches out to people and cares and shows humility in all of our. That's who God is, and that's God's call for each one of our lives, that we would be that. It's very hard for us to want to be that. Why? Because we are steeped in sin. Because sin has come down and says, no, this world is all about you as an individual. Nothing important happened before you were born. After you go, nothing will be important again. Your life is the epitome of all of human history. The people you know are the most important people to know. The things that you accomplish are most important things. And you better accomplish a lot, because if you don't, you're going to lose everything. That's how the world teaches us. And so we come into this world being the very opposite of humble, the very opposite of a servant, in an effort to establish who we are among other people and in the eyes and the reputations of other people. Meanwhile, God's sitting up there going, no. No. Everything you have, I've given you. Everything you don't have, I haven't given you. And everything you're going to have, and you just wait. You just wait. Maybe not only in this world, but just wait till the world to come. You will have so much more, and none of it will be by your own hands. Just like you did nothing for a tree to reproduce itself, God will give you out of his own love for you, out of his own care for you, his own desire to see you at your very best. God will give that to you. And until we are able to encompass that and understand that, we're going to suffer. We're going to lose a lot. But with that, we begin to see just the grace, the divinity of being humble, the divinity of serving others, and that we soon begin to see that that is the most important value in humanity. People are attracted to humility. People embrace it. People want to engage with people who are humble, people who are servant. Just think about it in your own life. The people you know, are they the proud? Are they the arrogant? No, they're the humble. In the same way for you and for me today, God calls us, and the promise is, in our humility and in our servanthood, we will achieve the very best that there is in this lifetime, that God promises us that. When we act in humility, when we act in servanthood, we often think that we're the ones that are going to lose. You don't lose, because it's not you gaining anything, it's God giving you everything. And by being a servant, by being humble, you are opening up your life to somebody who God can bless, who God can give, who God in his infinite wisdom and his infinite resources is able to build up. We put ourselves there to let our lives be the lives that God has created, the lives that God has made. Is it absolutely countercultural to everything that we see and everything everybody tells us and our own system of justice and our own? Absolutely. But yep, here we are. This is what the game is. This is what the new rules are. This is what Jesus Christ came to do that. I remember when I was a kid, I remember this little boy, and he got beat up on the playground. He had a big black eye. And I could tell that it really rattled this little boy to have a bully do that to him. And he was just stunned and shocked that this would happen. And he was very, very hurt, not only physically, but on the inside. And I remember he made his way out of the playground, and he made his way over to where the school building was, and there's like this awning that went out over where the elementary classes were, and he leaned himself up against this brick wall. It was a classroom. It was a cement floor, and he leaned himself up, and he brought his knees up to his chest, and he wrapped his arms around his knees, and he just buried his face into his knees, and he was so humiliated. And even being young and seeing that, I knew that in my heart, I knew this is not something that's going to go away. This is something that's going to follow. This is an experience. This is a landmark event that is not going to work out well for this boy. Something was broken. Something was damaged in that, the way this boy took this whole thing. And then I remember there was this teacher, and he probably hadn't been out of college more than a year or two. He's a very young-looking guy, and he came over, and he sat down right by this little boy. And he brought his knees up to his chest, and he wrapped his arms around his knees, and his head just went down. And he just sat there with this little boy. And I remember that this little boy, and I had gone back to the swing set or wherever it was, and I remember looking back, and they were having a conversation. And that's when looking back on that story, I learned the difference between being a teacher and being an educator. And I began to see the role that a person plays in the life of another. When you come alongside them, show them how to live and how to endure things and how we can be okay as we go through the worst of things on this earth. I remember just loving that moment. And it just tells me over and over again about how Jesus comes to us in our humility. Jesus comes to us in our brokenness. There used to be, remember Billy Graham? I don't know if a lot of you know Billy Graham, but maybe a generation ago, he was the greatest preacher, the greatest evangelist the world had ever known. He spoke to more people, shared out Jesus to more people on the globe than anybody had ever or since shared with people. But Billy Graham wasn't always the most of anything. He used to be, at best, second best. There's an organization still across today, very active in college campuses, called Campus Crusade for Christ. And that's who Billy Graham was a preacher for, and people would invite him to come speak at their campuses. You would invite Billy Graham if you couldn't get the main guy. And the main guy, his name was Charles Templeton. Charles Templeton, even Time magazine wrote about him, says the greatest evangelist of our age, the most effective, most powerful. And even after they wrote that about him, 5 years later, Charles Templeton decided that he doesn't believe in Jesus anymore. And he did what they call today, he deconstructed himself. And he managed to move the center of his life to a very humanist perspective and says, I'm not going to believe in Jesus anymore. He did that even at a young age. 50 years later, there's a journalist who was writing about the church, writing about Christians, and he came across this story. And he went and he found that Charles Templeton was still alive. I believe he was living in Colorado. And he asked if he could have a meeting with them. And sure, yeah, I'll accept a meeting with you. And he came and he began to talk to the guy. And after they had established some rapport, the journalist asked him, and now, after all these years, from where you were and where you are now, what is your opinion of Jesus Christ? And in the article, the journalist writes that Templeton, he paused for just a moment, and he said, Jesus Christ is the greatest human being who ever lived. And he went on to say, everything that I know of that is good, everything that I know that is decent, everything that I know that is pure, I learned from Jesus Christ. And then he said, I miss him. I miss him. And he got his hands and he put his face in his hands and cried like a baby. And the last thing the journalist remembered him saying, because at that point the interview wasn't going to go on, he heard him repeat that again, I miss him. And you know, that is something that transcends. He probably walked away from Jesus on a content basis, on an academic basis. But he was not able to walk away from Jesus on a heart basis. That Jesus had revealed himself to him. And after he had rejected Jesus the very best he could, he still had a memory of what it was like to have known Jesus. And this passage, to have the mindset of Jesus, is exactly that, is to come to know the true Jesus and to realize just how much he loves you, how much he cares about you. There's something in life, in following Jesus, that transforms us, that changes us. And so, even though we have sorrow, even though we experience defeat, even if we have problems and go through terrible trials, even if we have heartache and tears, if we take those experiences and mix them with God's great love for you, God's great love for the world, what Christ desires in his relationship with you, and the promises that God has, that not only has he created this world, but he has a whole nother world on its way that will be a reward for everything that we've gone through. If we will see that, we will, mixing all those horrible things with God's love for you, when you mix that, the things that the devil put on this earth to destroy you now become the very thing, the very balm, the very therapy that God uses to heal you. Mix all those terrible things with God's love and everything changes. Everything changes. And that is the gospel. That's the story that we see here of, this is the secret of humility. It's understanding God's deep love and connection and resonance with you, and the vulnerability and understanding of what you go through. You mix that when you understand his great love, and the reason he is with you is out of his great love for you. And that becomes the very thing that heals you in this world. Do we have anything to be proud of outside of what Jesus Christ is? No, because it all disappears. I drove by a cemetery coming down Allen Rock the other day, and I thought about, well, I don't know what the guy did, but all gone now. It's all gone now. But not so with Jesus. Not so with Jesus. The person who knows Jesus Christ is building up eternity in their heart, eternity in their life. And what they do in this world, what you and I do, it follows us into eternity. It follows us into eternity. It's the pattern that we go. And that's what it is. It's this. That's the story of Palm Sunday. That's the beautiful story of Palm Sunday. Everybody should have gotten a little palm, whatever these little cross, made out of a palm to remind us of what Jesus did. The most expression of humility Jesus goes through there. Did he respond to the crowd hailing him and getting on a podium and talking about now's our time to take over, or we can do this? No. He ignored it all, knowing that God had a purpose for his life, and he was fixed on that. And in the same way that we ourselves would be distracted to find our own identity, to find our own legacy, to find our own destiny, to say, nope, God has a purpose for my life, and it doesn't involve anything that's not given me humility, anything that doesn't show me as a servant. But what does give me humility, the way I react, the way I can put that into practice, and the way I can show myself a servant to God, and obedient to God, and a servant of those around me, that's where life is. That's where victory is. My desire, my hope for you is that this would be a true Palm Sunday for you, that you would come through life with trying all the distractions, but you would know who you are in Jesus, and you know who loves you, and you know who is the one who provides for you, who takes care of you, and will always be there for you and supply every need you could ever have, both in this world and throughout all of eternity. Let us pray.